Look, we might be 3 days late, but I said we were going to get to this, and we are getting to this right now. We're going to take a look at Warhammer the Old World. There's a new Bretonnian Paladin and a new Tomb King. Just let that sink in. Just let that sink in. New Tomb King, new Bretonnian. That's quality. So there is initially a little bit of bad news in that both of these are resin models. Now, I need to go back and fully watch the stream where they're talking about these two, because I think it's worth having a longer discussion about how they're going to approach the old world. This time around we're looking at models. We're not going to do a massive deep dive because that's going to be its own long thing. But I do think this is a good start. Now, as I've said here, new models will be released in plastic and resin, and there's going to be a whole range of resurrected and revitalised miniatures from previous editions of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, in plastic, resin and metal, which, yeah, there's a whole discussion to have about this, and this video is not the space for that. So, first up, let's take a look at the Tomb King, and that is some excellent, like, skin and bone work there. I really like what they've done here, because the fact that the skin is still present in some sections, but it's, like, shriveled, and it's pulling away from the bone, so, like, you've just got skeletal hands and feet. You've got that kind of skeletal midriff where the stomach is just missing, but there is still skin going on. It's just shrinking away from the bones. I really like that. That's really cool. I like the kind of time-worn, cracked aspect to some of the armour. Like, you've got gaps in it where it's clearly been damaged and never repaired. I like that a lot. It is a little busy, but I don't think it's too busy. It's kind of spread out nicely at the very least. The fact that all the cloth is kind of moth-eaten and holy, I really like that a lot as well. Like, there's some really nice details going on here. There is some really nice detail on that cloak, but yeah, I'm loving the tattered look to it. It's fantastic. The extremely, like, notched blade on the... Is it a khopesh? Is that how it's pronounced? The curved swords? Because it's not like a scimitar, is it? It's like, it's a different design to that, but I think that's something like it. Either way, the notches on the blade are really cool. I like that. I just like when they're doing something that's properly ancient, properly undead, having those elements of damage, it just ties it all together. It just kind of makes it more real for me. We do have a few little scarab motifs going on. There's a couple of actual scarabs that have been carved into the model. I'm not sure I'm particularly a fan of the ones carved in. They look okay, but I think it would do perfectly well without that extra detail. That is definitely something that I feel like... I mean, I'm trying to remember, I can only vaguely remember the Tomb King's range of old anyway. I do know that some of the stuff that Tomb Kings had, it felt like was not actually really all that old by the time Fantasy died, and there are some kits that they had that I just wish were still available now. And hopefully, like, they will just be brought back as is, because some of them, they still hold up now if you can get hold of them. But I'm trying to think whether there was like a ton of scarabs over everything. I'm trying to remember, and I don't think necessarily there's too many going on here, but I do feel like it's an added bit of detail that isn't actually all that necessary. I don't know that it brings anything to the model. Having the scarab emblem on the front and the back of the of that kind of like armor across the chest and the shoulders, I feel like that's enough. I don't think that you need anything else, especially given how quite detail heavy the model is. But that's something that I feel like Games Workshop do a lot more these days. They'll pick a thing and they will run with it to like an extreme degree. You see it on Space Marines all the time, where if there's a skull on one part of the Space Marine, that means there's going to be a skull on 18 other parts of said Space Marine. And it's a trend that I feel like could do with just back off it just a little bit, you know? You only have to look at the Death Guard range to know that there is definitely an issue with over-detailing in some of Games Workshop's models. And it can be a little bit frustrating at times, because then you'll get things like some of the Underworld warbands, which are just fantastic and are the right amount for what they are. I don't necessarily know that this Tomb King is falling into that category by having a few extra scarabs, but I don't necessarily think they add anything to it. I think the overall silhouette is really good. The level of detail and everything is really nice. The pose is decent. He's not standing on a rock, which is a nice change. The detail on the weapons is really nice. You've already got plenty of cloth and like segmented metal, and I feel like that's enough, you know? Definitely feels like a good start. I do like that model. Now, we also have the Bretonnian Paladin, which I am actually quite liking. So, it's a cool... It feels like older. I don't know how else to put it, but the styling of this feels closer to like older Games Workshop stuff than newer, at least from the front. I think it's a mixture of the scale, the way the robes and the armour have been done, which doesn't look bad, don't get me wrong, I do like the armour quite a lot. And there are definitely like modern Games Workshop things going on here as well, like the sword through the orc's head in the ground, like the detail on the helmet is really nice. And then when we look at it from the back, there's so much extra going on here. You've got the scabbard, which has got like a bunch of different like relics and lockboxes and trinkets and trophies hanging off it. Like, that feels very modern GW. But the model overall, I'd say that feels more like old GW to me. That's not necessarily a complaint either. I do like this. There's something kind of simple about it, and not in a bad way. I think a lot of it comes down to that sort of armour design. Like, when you look at Armoured Chaos models, the armour is incredibly ornate, it's, like, fashioned in very specific ways. When it comes to things like the Stormcast Eternals, the newer armour is definitely, like, simpler than the older armour, it's less ornate. Even the Age of Sigmar Cavaliers that we looked at the other day, they were quite stylised for what they are. Even the armour on the horses, even though it was just like very simple shapes, it still had a lot of extra detail going on. This though doesn't really have any of that. It looks far more functional. I know we've got a bit of like extra stuff going on. We've got that kind of shield across one of the shoulders. There's obviously the robes as well. We've got a little bit of chainmail and stuff going on, but the actual armour itself is very clean, very simple, not at all ornate. The most fancy aspect of this miniature is the helmet. Like, that is the thing that draws the eye the most, in terms of decoration, in terms of looking that little bit extra. It's the helmet more than anything else, and to be fair, I think that's pretty rare these days. It definitely has like a classic feel to me, and I'm really liking it because of that. Because the thing is, there is a time and a place for your super ornate armour, but there is also a time and a place for things to be a bit more simple. Not everything has to be dialed up to 11 100% of the time, but this is getting the cool factor without necessarily being massively over-detailed or anything. I like it. I really do. Of course, a lot of what I've just said does fall apart as soon as you look at what's hanging off the scabbard. From the front, I feel like it's fair. And I am a sucker for that kind of like, the kind of wandering knight sort of feel, where it's just all this stuff has been collected or taken as trophies. I really like that kind of look. For me, these two are pretty good, and I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing what else they do. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of balance they strike. And it's going to be so interesting as we kind of move along with the old world to see what they keep. Like, what makes a return, what they decide to update or bring back, what they decide to just sell again, especially in terms of like the metal miniatures. It's going to be super interesting to see how they handle this. The question is, what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video, subscribe, all that stuff. Click it if you like, don't click if you don't want to. And as always, there's an affiliate link in the description for Element Games, which you can use to support the channel if you like. I leave it in your capable hands. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.